Hello, HSPC. Today's meditation is taken from Proverbs 17 and selected verses. If you'd like a more organized and carefully crafted meditation, you should read the PDF version that has been attached to the e-blast. But today I'm just going to talk the podcast, just more openly, reading through the verses. So I've clustered some of the verses together and some are stand-alone. The first two verses, verse 1, Proverbs 17, verse 1. Better is a dry morsel with quiet than a house full of feasting with strife. And then verse 14. The beginning of strife is like letting out water, so stop before the quarrel breaks out. The imagery is really evocative, I find. Better is a dry morsel. It's the idea of having a house or a household or having little, basically. Having little in your house, having little food, and yet with quiet. Quiet is not simply no activity or no enjoyment. Quiet is about not having conflict, having peace. Quiet. Better a dry morsel, better to have poverty and quiet than a house full of feasting. So a house that has a lot and yet with conflict, with strife. It's interesting, isn't it? To think about, and Proverbs does this, a lot of material benefit, because so much of our world, just like the world then, was focused on having material things, material wealth, prosperity, things, and yet the inner values, the inner relational quality of life, which, let's face it, is at the end of the day so much more important. Obviously, we need food to live and the basics, shelter and so on. But once we have those basics, how much do we need? But it's how do we cultivate those inner relational values? Ultimately, it's an umbrella, which the peak is love, but all these very particular relational values. So the idea of strife and conflict and how burdensome it is, it's not always our fault, obviously. We come into things, and a lot of Proverbs are about how to navigate conflict, how to do it better. But this one is simply giving us some beautiful imagery. That's better, to have little and to have a quiet, peaceful life than to have conflict. Better to let out the water, find ways to let out steam, to relax things before things get out of hand, before things get out of control, before the quarrel breaks out. Then the other two verses, which really follow what happens when conflict has happened, when trouble has come. Verse 9, one who forgives an affront fosters friendship, but one who dwells on disputes will alienate a friend. Can a relationship of deep connection, deep intimacy, deep mutual love and care, can such a relationship be possible without forgiveness? There is no way we live lives where we are intertwined with others, where there aren't times where we fall into not only conflict, but disagreement, hurt, where we experience hurt from others, whether that's their intention or not, where we cause hurt to others and we are confronted by that. Forgiveness is essential, because then the relationship goes deeper, humanizes us. We recognize our humanity, that we're not always at our best. Sometimes we are at our absolute worst for any number of reasons. And one of those reasons comes again in verse 17. A friend loves at all times, and kinsfolk are born to share adversity. Kinsfolk are supposed to be family. And as we know, family is not just biology. Family becomes those who are in our lives and committed to us through life, through thick and thin, through even death. A friend loves at all times, and kinsfolk are born to share adversity, not just to share in the good times, but to share in the very difficult times when we are spent, when we are at our worst, when we have nothing to give. those who are there for us and will sit with us, walk with us, stand with us, wait for us. Those are truly the friends and kinsfolk we need. Verse 3, the crucible is for silver and the furnace is for gold, but the Lord tests the heart. How much value do we put in the heart? The heart is that part of us, again, it's a metaphor, right? Not just physical. It's at the center of our being, yes, spiritually speaking too. And the heart is not visible. Where we are inside is not always visible. We can interpret where people's hearts are at, but we're not always accurate or able to see. The Lord tests the heart. What is truly there? What is truly within us? And we know it's not always straightforward, but a purity of heart. How much is this a value? How much is this something we put our effort to cultivate? We cultivate practices to help deepen and purify our hearts. You know, the focus so much in the world is on silver and gold. They represent precious metals, and the idea of a furnace, of purifying those to make them ever more precious and valuable. What do we do about our heart? How do we exercise our hearts to purify them? Verse 8. A bribe is like a magic stone in the eyes of those who give it. Wherever they turn, they prosper. So 8 on its own would give us the impression that, it pays to offer bribes, to be dishonest, to kind of pay people to be corrupt or to serve our interests, regardless of whether there's truth behind it or if it's authentic, right? A bribe is like a magic stone in the eyes of those who give it. But this is where it's so important to read all of Scripture together, not just pick out a verse and make it serve your own purposes, right? Because then verse 23, same chapter, says this: the wicked accept a concealed bribe to pervert the ways of justice. The wicked are not the good. They accept a concealed bribe. A bribe is something people don't all see, but you see it, you know it. And obviously you're paid to what? Pervert the ways of justice in some way, to be dishonest, to do something, whether it's to someone else or for someone else. But it's not right. And clearly there's a cost to that, but we don't always weigh the cost. Again, Proverbs is very big on comparing material benefits in the world, but then with the values of the heart and of justice and of truth, which are often at odds with material benefit. Better, the choices are always there for us in our lives. Where do we put our value, and how much are we willing to pay? What cost are we willing to pay to hold on to our values of justice, truth, purity of heart, no matter what? Even if it's speaking truth to someone, even if it's losing some kind of material advantage. Finally, verse 10. A rebuke strikes deeper into a discerning person than 100 blows into a fool. I've often thought about that. Often I do things, whether it's writing a sermon or doing other things, and criticism is important for me. Without criticism, I cannot grow. And I think that's the same for any person. We need to have people in our lives we can trust, who can speak truth to us. But truth can hurt. Truth can be difficult. And sometimes we have to find the right time. I will often tell, Pam, you're going to tell me something about a sermon. Don't tell me right after worship. Give me some time, because I put everything into it. My heart, my soul. It's taken weeks to come to find the right words to express, to check in. Is this authentic to what I want to say, what I'm feeling, what I believe, or not just words? Anyhow, this is important. Criticism is important. Rebuke is important. Someone to set us straight. Hey, you behaved this way, or you acted this way, or this hurt, or this, I don't know that this was the best way to deal with it. conscientious person actually, it stings. They take it to heart. Whereas it says 100 blows, than 100 blows into a fool. I mean, people who don't listen or who refuse to listen or who have been programmed over a time, it's sort of developed into this way of basically not hearing any kind of criticism or not taking it to heart, trusting the source, saying, wait a second, if those people feel that way, people feel this way, or this person says this, then I need to think about this, ponder it, as difficult as it is. How many of our leaders, think about that, even in external life, actually listen carefully to criticism, to take it to heart? Or is it simply about how they can get ahead? This is important. And may we find in wisdom of Proverbs ways in which our lives are not only enhanced externally, but internally, where it matters most before God. The Lord tests the heart, as verse 3 says. Thank you.